Good morning, afternoon or evening wherever you are. I'm Paul Clark and welcome to my studio. Now, what have I got for you today? Well, I've had a number of requests for some sunbeams or sunshine coming through the trees. Now, potentially quite a tricky thing to do in watercolour, but I think I've got some great techniques. So come and join me and we'll paint this step by step together. Okay, today's materials. My paper is some Bockingford Rough, £200, but any decent watercolour paper will do. My colours today, some French Ultramarine, Payne's Grey, Dioxazine Purple, Burnt Sienna, Burnt Umber, Sap Green and Cadmium Yellow. 6 brushes today, a ProArt large Harkay brush, my trusty No.3 Rigger, No.6 round, No.12 round and 3/4 inch flat. So here's the stunning reference photo this is based on. It was kindly sent to me from one of my regular students, so a big thank you goes to Trevor. So the first thing to remember when you have the sun bursting through the trees is to have a centre spot of light which every beam will radiate from. Even where there's a gap in the rays of light, they still must go back to that centre point. Now I know this sounds obvious, but I have seen this in my time where the light is coming from different directions. So it's important that you get this right. So it's a very simple line drawing here, so no template needed today. Now because I want to get a lot of water down very quickly, I'm using a large Harkay brush and really soaking the paper with clean water. Now with my flat brush I'm splashing in loads of colours, including sap green, burnt sienna, ultramarine, Payne's grey and even some purple, and simply letting them all blend but keeping that central area white. Now just dabbing out here with a piece of tissue. Now taking my No.12 brush and making sure it's nice and dry, I'm lifting out from that central point. Now you'll probably have to do this several times as the wet wash tends to creep back in. This has to be done while all the paint is very wet. And here I'm using a smaller No.6 brush. And I'm adding in just a little colour here into some of those gaps. It's all still wet, so I'm building up the colours and putting in some of these middle ground bushes. So in with the foreground with similar colours, lots of lovely greens, and leaving the centre section for the path. Here, just a little sprinkle of table salt. And here I'm just dropping in some clean water into the wet washes to force a few back runs to create some sort of nice random texture. Now for the path, with any watery brownish colour will do, just to give some contrast with the grass banks. And I'm dropping in a little yellow here to give a little warmth in this area. So now we need to let this totally dry. So it's a perfect time for a short break and a glass of Sunburst Golden Ale, all from our local brewery. Next, I'm getting an ordinary gardener's spray bottle out and giving the paper a good squirt. Now this type of bottle is perfect because it sprays thousands of tiny droplets rather than a fine mist. So when I paint in these trees, I'll get a nice soft fuzzy edge. I'm using a mixture of burnt umber and ultramarine and starting with my number 12 brush. And now for the smaller branches with my number 6. Next, I'm using my trusty rigger, and it's just the perfect brush for these smaller branches. Because of its long length of bristles, it's very springy and it sort of does its own thing, and I just love it. I'm also painting in a lighter value golden colour into the area where most of the light is, and constantly respraying to fuzz up those edges. Now if you can paint these branches in with a quick one-stroke technique, they will always look more natural and unlaboured. just building up some of these bushes with some sap green using my number 12. And of course some splattering. Sap green again. And what will happen here is I should get a nice variation of texture. Some splats will go into dry paper and some splats will go into the damp. Next for the shadows on the path, and I'm re-wetting it and letting the water soak in just for a few moments. Then using my number 6 brush, I'm painting in some dioxazine purple with a little touch of burnt sienna into the wet to get these nice soft dappled light shadows. Next I'm using the lifting out technique with a wet brush. So I'm painting in the water with repeated strokes, then lifting out with a piece of tissue. It's just great for getting those subtle bursts of light. I'm just reducing the contrast here of some of the white highlights and then lifting out again for some suggestions of light on the path. Flicking in a little texture here, but only in the foreground. Next I'm using a yellow greenish pastel pencil to give the suggestions of a few bits of the foliage being caught by the light. My white, a few dabs of light in the tree canopy. Now with some dark green and my rigger for a few grass details, but again only in this foreground. Now with a little cadmium yellow, I'm just warming up this little area of the path. And I think we're just about done. Now, looking at it with fresh eyes the next morning, I just feel the sunburst here is a little too much, just a little too stark. So I'm going to re-wet this area and just knock it back slightly with a few wet in wet bands of green. And then with my magic scalpel, a few touches of strong light on the path. And now I think we're done. Now, before we finish, I did want to quickly show you another technique for lifting out light, especially in darker areas. Now, this is a painting I did earlier, which I thought was a bit over the top in the sunburst region. So what you can do is just place down a plastic ruler and with a damp tissue, just rub it to a nice soft movement in the paint, and it can look quite effective. Well, I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did, and you'll give it a go. It's all about timing this week, just knowing when to lift out those beams at the right moment. So, please don't forget, if you've got any further suggestions for some painting tutorials in the future, please put them down in the description below, and as ever, please don't forget to like, subscribe if you haven't already, leave a comment, and as always, I look forward to seeing you all again next week for another Watercolour Wednesday. Cheers everyone, take care.